Oh boy. Y'all gonna hate me for this one. What is up, BookTube? It is me, it is Monty, and I am finally back again to talk to you guys about some books. It's been a minute since I made a public-facing video, kind of. In April, as I do every other month over on Patreon, I did my little daily check-ins, and one of those daily check-ins was actually available to people who are not subscribed to the Patreon, so I'll leave that linked in the cards, because last month there was a discussion floating around about, like, where is the epic fantasy, and I wanted to chime in, but I wasn't really ready to upload a public-facing video, so I chimed in over on Patreon behind the paywall, but it's available to people who are not subscribed to the Patreon. So I think it's like 20 minutes. So if after this, however long this wrap-up is, you decide that you miss me that much, you can go over there and watch that video for free. If you like that video, you can subscribe for more. There's a ton of content over there. But I'm here today to do a wrap-up because I haven't done a wrap-up in a long time. And I know that if I put it off any longer, it's just going to be ridiculous. Like, the ideal time would have been to come in, in April and just recap the first 3 months of the year. But I didn't do that. And so now I have a lot of books. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to promise, spectacular reviews for everything that I'm going to talk about. Because there's 36 things, because I haven't filmed a single wrap up, but we're just gonna get through this. However long I talk about a book is however long I talk about a book, and that's just gonna be what it's going to be. So the very first thing, all the way back in the month of January, the very first thing I read was Percy Jackson's and the Olympians, The Last Olympian, book number 5, because last year, right around the time the Disney Plus show was coming out, I was like, it's been a minute since I reread those books. I should reread those books since I was rereading. And I didn't get to book 5 until the beginning of the year. And I liked book 5 a lot more than I remember as a child. And overall, I like the series more as an adult than I remember liking as a child. But there was still something about this that, what did I say on Goodreads? Did I rewrite a review? Maybe I did. Let's see. And I did not write a review. So I know I talked about it I did vlog it. I think it was part of my January Patreon vlog because I had to read Stone Cold Fox for the patrons that month. And I feel like I read that week. So like it was a good conclusion. And I like Percy. I like Annabeth. I like them as a group of people. Grover's okay. In reading this, I remembered like just how much I did not like that TV adaptation on Disney Plus. I mean, I saw the writing on the wall very early on. And I think like by the end of that first season, there was a lot more fans that were complicated in their emotions. Like, I don't think it's a bad show, but I do think there were times in the show where like Rick, and I think this is just the problem of Rick as an author, like Rick I think wants to have his cake and eat it too. Like he wants to like be perceived in a certain way, and so like that's how he moves. I just think that I'm in no rush to continue on my Percy Jackson journey and to like really finish things up over there. But it was a fun time to start off the year. Then I read Even If the Sky is Falling by Taj McCoy and a collection of other authors. This was for Kenya Silly Reads Book Club. In 2024, my goal is to be a better book club participant. And so I checked this out from Hoopla. I listened to some of the short stories. Some of the short stories were fine. The basic premise of the collection and all the stories kind of play into this is years before the start of this book, some space debris came through the atmosphere and nearly took out a commercial airliner. And so because space junk is going to continue to fall out of orbit because, just junk, in our own orbit from like satellites that are in no longer use or whatever it is, like that stuff is going to keep, Earth is going to, eventually pull out of orbit sometime. The scientists of the world decided that there should be an alert system in place for this kind of a situation. And so at the beginning of the at the beginning of the short story collection, we are seeing a team of scientists go out and set up like the last thing that's necessary for America to have the response system at the ready. And in doing so, they kind of like set off an emergency broadcast, letting people think the world is, there's imminent space debris going to fall and collapse. And that's just not the case. So this book, like the first story had a lot to do with like setting up the premise, and it was just a little bit too unserious. Like it had a lot to do. And I feel like because it was doing a lot to like set up the collection, it wasn't the strongest. And I think that it didn't necessarily get the collection off on its best foot. But the other stories in this were like kind of fun, particularly the one set in Atlanta with the like rival food truck and like the food stall. That was probably one of the best ones on the collection. It stuck with me after the fact. I did like Lane Clark's story in this one. It was like a Savick law students trapped in a bunker. I appreciated that one. There were stories in this one I didn't appreciate. Like there was a jingle writer, like a person who like makes the jingles for, you know, like Stanley Steamers or whatever. She got trapped in her finished basement with the man who was there to like refinish her cabinets, but she was fresh out the shower and like didn't have any clothes on. And it was just a little bit too unserious for me. So, and then there was like another one where it was like a visiting professor was like coming back to like get an award. And that was also a little bit unserious, but overall, I felt like it was a strong collection. But I'm also like not a short story person. So some of these I think could have benefited from being full length novels. And some of these was like, it's really cute that you had this idea and I'm happy you got it out. So like you don't ever need to refinish. Like we don't need to revisit this ever in life. Then I read Stone Cold Fox by Rachel Collar. Like I said, this was voted on by my patrons because every month I let them pick a book. I read the book. They get a weekly vlog. If it's an off month, if it's a month where I'm doing daily check-ins, then it'll be a standalone video, but it won't necessarily include other things that are going on in my reading life. So Stone Cold Fox, the basic premise is there's this woman who is a con artist. She was raised by a con artist, and she's trying to con her way into this wealthy family. I wound up giving this, I think it was like, yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I really appreciated the story. We do kind of bounce around between her life growing up, being raised by this con artist, and then her life in the present when she's trying to marry into this family and like the complications that she is finding herself. She also finds that her past life is catching up with her in ways that she didn't necessarily expect. It's not the world's best book. And I think that when you say like con artist, that is kind of like have some negative connotations to it. Not only because like they're a con artist, like they're cheating people out of something, but I think that in the bookish space, like conning and heist novels are either like supposed to be excellent or they're just gonna like fall flat on their face. And I don't think this was excellent, but I think that it was an interesting character study. It worked in terms of a plot that I found engaging. I appreciated this woman and like seeing her navigating what she was going through. Then I read Faebound, the first book in the Faebound series by Sarah El-Arifi, because y'all know me and sister Sarah, we have a history, okay? This is another adult novel, I'm pretty sure, because the characters are like damn near 30. But this is in a new world. The basic premise of this world is there used to be 3 factions of like beings that kind of lived in harmony, but like not so much. You had your fairies, which is our main character. You had elves, which are... Oh no, the main characters are elves and they wind up in the fairylands. That's what it was. Okay. So you have our elf characters who like are currently at present in war with one another, and they think that they're the only beings left on this planet. Then you have the fairies who are trapped beneath the surface of the planet, and you have humans who have not really been seen in eons, and it's probably because they were killed off, genocided. And it's because of the genocide that the fairies are kind of trapped underground because they made a deal and like it doesn't really matter. But you have fairies, elves, and humans. The humans don't really factor into anything aside from the lore of what's connecting the fairies to where they are currently at. And so at the beginning of our story, we're following our main character, and her sister is like a seer. She's a seer elf. She thinks that she is going to be the prophetess of the prophetesses, and she has this vision that her sister is going to find glory in the east. I think it's east. It might be the west. She's going to find glory in a certain direction. And so our main character, let me just pull up the Goodreads page so I can stop saying our main character and like her sister. They have, fantasy names. So I do think it's a little bit unserious. We have Lettle. Lettle was the seer girl. And urine. I hated this. In the audiobook, it was sounding like urine. So you have Urine, who is the... she's like a general, right, in the elven army. And so Urine is like, in the back of her mind, she has this prophecy from her sister thinking, okay, I'm going to find glory in this certain direction. And so when she's out on a patrol, she gets this information. And so she takes this information and she's like, well, my sister did say I was going to find glory in that direction. So maybe I should take my little contingent of soldiers in that direction and like see what's happening over there. The plot twist happens. She goes in that direction and her entire squadron is slaughtered, just murdered. You hate to see it. I think there's like one survivor, her and one other survivor. So when she comes back to her little elf tribe, her little elf community, They're not very happy with her, even though she's been sleeping with the leader. So like maybe she could get out of it. Instead, she gets banned. She is like, yeah, people, you killed some of our best soldiers here. Like, you really just shot ourselves in the foot. And normally we would execute you, but because we've been fucking, I'm going to let you be banished. And so Yurin is just like gutted over this. She's very sad. But don't worry, Lettel and the other surviving person from her squad of elven soldiers decide they're going to leave with her. And so now we have our little trio out in the world, and they're hunting this like magical creature that Lettel uses to divine her prophecies. And that's when the Fae comes into the storyline, and it just kind of goes from there. And the story really becomes this interesting dynamic that Yurin is supposed to have with this creature that is unusual. They're not supposed to have this connection, but they do. And then you have Lettel trying to relearn being a prophetess of the prophetesses when she's no longer able to do things the way that they do in the Elven lands. It's really a setup book. It is a first book in a series that is foundational, but there's not a whole lot moving on. Like, there's not a lot of moving parts in this one. There are some other prophecies that come into play, and they play out in ways that feel very obvious. And because they're so obvious, you do see characters moving in directions that are like, obviously, if this is what I think, it's not going to be that way. So I need to like go out of my way to like avoid this prophecy coming true for as long as possible. But overall, like, it was fine. I don't think I like it more than the Ending Fire series, but I did respect it. I think that Sarah El-Arifi continues to have like really good ideas. It's really just in the execution of those ideas that where it starts to fall apart for me. Like, she's not ever able to like really cross the finish line as strong as I would like her to. And some of that I do think is me projecting, because I was really first made aware of Sarah El-Arifi in a discussion that she was having with R.F. Kuang. And I think if I had not seen them having a discussion with each other, I would never have really been this person that just expected things from Sarah El-Arifi. But in that conversation, I was like really respecting the arguments she was bringing to the table. And so it's like, I really want her to be able to bring some of those arguments she was able to bring in a discussion to the actual books, like take it from ideas to text. And maybe she'll be able to do that. That remains to be seen. But like I said, these characters are damn near 30 and they act like they're like 12 years old. So it was really hard just in like on a tonal level to really understand like what this was supposed to be. It almost in some ways felt like it was written originally to be a YA book, and then when they sold the Ending Fire series and they had an adult novel, they wanted to be an adult novelist, and so they just kind of aged up the characters. But this might have almost worked better if the characters were younger, just because then it would be able, just the way that they move and their motivations, it wouldn't make you side-eye them as much as they do. But it's like you're almost like you're a little long in the tooth to still be having that mental thought process and for those things to be guiding your actions in life. But maybe that's just me. Then I read Single Dads Club by Therese Bahari, also for the Lily Reads Book Club. This was set in South Africa, and I feel like that's the most interesting thing about this. I don't know. I've never really read a book set in South Africa, so that was, it was interesting just in that regard. This is the story. It's like a small town romance where this woman working at a cafe has this crush on who she thinks is a single father, and then she learns that this man is like living with his baby mother, but they're not together, so they can actually be together. And so she kind of like sets the single dad up to be her brother's friend. So like it's a lot going on here. Like, again, it's another story with a lot of ideas present, but the actual romance was a little sad. There was just too much struggling happening. There was this whole storyline about her main character was like a former socialite whose mother had defrauded people, and so she was kind of like living in hiding, and she was worried that the town folks were gonna like rip her from her bed in the middle of the night, even though she had like bent over backwards and helped all of them out at various points, just like ritualistically flogging herself in terms of like trying to get some kind of cosmic karma on her side. It was just a little bit unserious. People in the book club are very much divided in terms of like, I think an actual person did write this, but jokes have been made that it was written by AI. And, you know, who am I to judge those people that believe that? I don't know Teresa Hari from A Hole in the Wall, but it just was not for me. Then I read House of Flame and Shadow by Carson City by Sarah J. Maas. This is a book I actually did talk about publicly, so I will just leave that up in the cards because you know that I enjoyed that book more than most people, so it is what it is. I then read Icarus by Kate Ankrum. Kate Ingram is one of those authors I think I follow on Twitter, and I've seen them around a lot. And it's another author where I appreciate the way that they discuss books and like their life. They have lived a very interesting life. Like they just really have. But this book I just found to be very mediocre. To me, it felt like a lot of Kate Ingram telling me these characters had this history, that their fathers had this connection, that these characters had this connection. Ostensibly, it's supposed to be about this person who breaks into another person's house and is like stealing art. And in the process of doing this art thievery, there's kind of like a love story that happens between the two. And we come to find out that these characters are connected beyond just, one breaking into the, like, we kind of get a further motivation for like why this house, why this art. But to me, I was very bored. I was very bored by it. I do think that in terms of like an actual YA book for YA readers, this is it. I think that Kate Ingram is really out here doing the Lord's work and writing. If I had read this as an actual young adult reader, and I was actually 15, 16, 17 years old, even like 12, 13 years old, I would have gotten a lot more out of this than I did as an adult. As an adult reading this, I didn't get a whole lot out of it. I was not really enraptured by the text, but you can see all the things that Kate Ingram tweets about. Like, she really is a person who is like, I write short chapters for younger readers to like really get a sense of accomplishment. And when I was flipping through my ebook, I really did feel accomplished. Okay. When I was like tapping through these chapters, I said, yes, I am flying through this. Like, there was that sense to me, and these characters I think I really would have connected with if I was closer to them. But being so far removed, like, I would never say it's a bad book. It just very clearly did not connect with me. But I think for the actual age that Kate Ingram wrote this book for, they are eating good. They are still writing books. They have another book that they keep tweeting about coming out next year, maybe. I don't know if it has like a deal or if they're just drafting, but Kate Ingram is here for the people, and I love that for the people, but I'm not the people. I then listened to The Art of Scandal by Regina Black, and this book, I'm sorry, is raggedy. I think it already has been optioned to be turned into a movie or TV show, but to me, this was not it. This is the story of a woman whose name has long since, drifted from my mind. So let's scroll through Goodreads real quick. Rachel Abbott. So Rachel Abbott is the wife of a politician. He's a politician, right? Because he's like running for Congress. I think he's running for Senate. Yeah. Oh, he's a mayor with his eye on the White House. But I think for right now, he's trying to do a stepping stone situation. So Rachel is out here. She's trying to get married, but her husband he's been cheating on her. He has been having like an affair. They have conflict in their marriage, right? And so she agrees that she will stay married to this man while he's in the middle of his campaign, because her children are out of the house. She done raised her kids. She just gonna be a housewife. And so she says, I will stay with you for the duration of this campaign. Even though it's not do nothing for me, I will continue to sacrifice because I'm going to do that for you. But also, I think at the end of this, she wants to get the house. She's like, I had to sacrifice my life to give you your life. And so I had to pour my life into this house. And the last thing I'm going to let you do is divorce me and take this house from me. That's just not going to happen. So Rachel and her husband come to this agreement. There's this very public fight, and Rachel comes from like, I don't want to say, she comes from a rougher background than Matt. Matt definitely comes from like a line of politicians. It's giving like Kennedy fanfic, right? And so Rachel's like, I come from this history that's, not so glamorous. Like, you're going to give me this house. I'm going to live my life. Enter Nathan. So Nathan meets Rachel on the night that her and her husband get into this big blow up fight. Rachel says, I'm going to be a drunk. I'm going to go to the drive-in movie. I'm going to get drunk at the drive-in movie. I'm just going to pour my heart out to this little boy. I say little boy, this boy is like 24 years old. Now, come to find out, we first meet Nathan. We think that he is just kind of down on his luck. He runs a laundromat, and the laundromat's successful because it's the only laundromat in town. But like, to me, it was giving real raggedy. We come to find out that Nathan is the son of a high profile family in the community in which they live. And he's kind of like the butt joke of the family. He didn't go into the family business. He kind of like made a name for himself, and his father resents him because he did not join the family business. He went out and did his own thing. And I think that it's really great to have romance stories. This is going to come up again, like romance stories where women who are older are like getting back out there and finding love. But this just did not feel like that to me. Like, I don't know it just did not feel like she was really getting out there and like reclaiming her time, reclaiming her space. Like, she was going to be happy now because she didn't get to be happy then. There was something about this that just felt real struggle. it felt like some real struggling was happening. It didn't help that like Nathan wasn't really presented as this person who was like really running a laundromat. He just kind of inherited this laundromat from his grandmother because she knew that her grandson wasn't going to do nothing with his life, and he just wanted to be this artist. So he was like this struggling artist figure. And it's just like, a struggling artist is not gonna you're not gonna take care of you. And maybe that's not what you are looking for. And like, if she's happy, I'm happy. But as a book, this does not work for me. It didn't work for me. It didn't move my spirit. I was not swooning. I was not rooting for them. To me, like I said, it was a little bit raggedy. After that, did I listen to this? I think I did. Maybe I read it physically. I know I had it checked out from the library, but it was a love song for Ricki Wilde by Tia Williams. This book to me was too unserious. I'm about to spoil this book for you, so just skip ahead. Just know I didn't like it. This is a love story about a woman named Ricki Wilde, who is the daughter of an Atlanta funeral home tycoon. They have all of their money in this funeral home franchise that they have going. The other two daughters he has, have their own funeral home franchise. He wants Ricki Wilde to own a funeral home franchise. And to me, listen, I get it. I'm sure that Atlanta and the metro Atlanta area and the entire South is, there's a lot of people that live there. Every town needs a funeral home. Not gonna say they don't. I'm pretty sure, who is it? The OWN Network has there's a whole reality show based around a family who owns a funeral home that this could have inspired them, right? But Ricki Wilde does not want to own a funeral home. She wants to open a flower shop, and her family laughs at her. And to me, that was the first little, that's unserious. That doesn't even make any fucking sense. Because what do people do at a funeral? Every funeral on TV, what do they have? It's just flowers galore. And so that's the first conflict. Her family just makes fun of her for thinking that she could ever run a floral shop. And you would think, like I said, that however many funeral homes that you can have, you can't have them all in the same space. Like, you all live in Atlanta. They all live in like the same house. They all live in the little mansion compound. Like, to be serious, like, how many of the same funeral home business does one metro area really need? Like, it's not a Starbucks, like, how many does the same family need to own? I'll let you guys fight about that in the comments. So Ricki, she meets this woman who's coming in to like do a funeral, plan her deceased loved one's situation. And they strike up this friendship, and she's talking about how, I want to open a flower shop. And so this old lady's like, I have a brownstone in New York. It would be perfect for your business. You can rent it from me. How about that? And it's like, okay, sure. So now we see Ricki Wilde in New York, where she meets this man. This man is over 100 years old. I thought there was just going to be flashbacks to the past, but no, this man has been walking around New York since the 1920s when he came there to do some jazz or some shit. And one night he was seeing this girl casually, and this girl he was seeing flung herself off a roof because she thought he was going to propose to her. They had been talking. They had been, flirting a little bit. They had been getting close to one another. She thought he was going to make an honest woman out of her and be a father to the daughter she had back home down in the South. And he was not. So she said, let me fling myself from this roof and put a hoodoo voodoo hex on you. And so for a big chunk of this book, where the love interest is present and accounted for, it's this idea that this hoodoo voodoo curse is just the most evil of evil things. That voodoo and it only exists to serve this negative purpose. And our main character and this man are running around trying to figure out how to break the curse because they can just feel this innate connection with another. Mind you, this man is not really present for most of the book. I think there's 150 pages of her living her life, 50 pages of her continuing to live her life, setting up her shop in New York City, seeing it kind of flounder, seeing this man occasionally. But for him to be a serious love interest, he's in it for like this much of the book. Eventually, they make peace with the fact that we ain't going to be able to break the curse because she's his true love. And so she has to die for the curse to break. True love has to die. She got to die for the curse to break. Someone has to die for him not to be alive to not be stuck as an immortal being any longer. Cut to the end of the book. And the curse is broken, not because Ricki Wilde died, because this is still a romance, so they are going to end up together. But the old woman we met at the beginning, the old woman who's been living above the flower shop and was acting like her pseudo grandmother because her Ricki's family is, foolish, has been supporting Ricki as she was giving away these expensive ass flowers for free, taking Instagram pictures around town. Like, she could have done that shit in Atlanta. We find out that old lady was the daughter of the woman who flung herself off the roof. And she committed suicide so that Ricki Wilde could be with the man who pushed her mother to suicide. And maybe I'm just built different. I don't know. But let me fuck around and find out that the man my mama was seeing when I was a baby back home, the man who was sweet talking my mother, was, having a good time, flirting and kikiing, to the point where my mother was so in love with this man that she committed suicide and put a curse on him and his family. Let me be the one to break it so he can go fuck this random person I met in an Atlanta funeral party. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. So to me, the book was too unserious. Couldn't do it. Next up, I listened to The Days of Afrekete because I had an Audible credit from their I had a trial going and they had a 2-for-1 deal. So I listened to The Days of Afrekete. This was good time. Good time. Would I've ever picked up this book without that deal? No, I wouldn't have. Would never have seen it. But we got two perspectives. You have Lizelle. I'm reading from a Goodreads review. You have Lizelle, who's a woman watching as her marriage reaches a turning point, and then we have Selena, who Lizelle was engaged with, messing around with in her college years. And so we have two perspectives and kind of two timelines. So we see Lizelle and Selena in their college years as their life is, lifing, the chaos that's there. But we also see Lizelle and Selena in the future and how different their paths diverge. Like, from their college years to where they are in the present, their lives are vastly different, and how these women got there. And how Asali Solomon was able to do this. This book is short. It's very short. This book is 208 pages. And the amount of story that Asali Solomon was able to tell in 208 pages, from their college years to this present, the divergence of these women, the connection they had, the romance they shared in 208 pages, listen, made me believe in novellas. I think this is just classified as a novel, but like, there are a lot of people who wish they could do what Asali Solomon was doing in those 208 pages. Next up was One in the Chamber by Robin Piguero, because I love Robin Piguero, based on their debut novel With Prejudice, which was a take on 12 Angry Men, I believe. One in the Chamber details this group of congressional interns as they plot to murder some of the Congress people they work for and maybe shape a presidential election. And I went into this book thinking it was going to be that, congressional interns being serial killers, how to get away with murder for the congressional intern world. And it's very much not that. What this book does give is, actually, I don't want to say too much, but I will warn you that if you go into this book, do be aware that there is a significant portion of time played to sexual assault, the impact of sexual assault, the mindset of someone who's committing sexual assault, what is happening. It is much. And there was a good 15, like, when we started getting to that point in the book, because a lot of the book is just them planning to murder some Congress people. But when we start getting into this, like, the sexual assault area, the sex crimes area of the book, I was like, what am I reading? Because it really did, I don't want to say it came out of nowhere, but it just kind of blindsided me to like what was occurring as I was reading. And for a minute there, I was worried that like Robin Piguero, we were going to have to, we have to fight. We have to square up. Not that I could fight this person, but like I was going to have to. But the book ended eventually, as all books do. And it was immaculate. It was really good. So I think did I give it a full 5? I had to give it a full 5, right? Yes. Full 5 stars. It really did what needed to be done there. One that did not do what needed to be done was Watch Where They Hide, the second Jordan Manning book from Tamron Hall. This one was just not interesting. I think that Tamron Hall has this is, ironically enough, I think like the second one of these kinds of a book where I can see the vision It just feels like we are too in the present moment, because the Jordan Manning books don't necessarily feel like they're set in 2024, 2023, as like when they're coming out. They feel set in an earlier time, in like the heyday of these long running series where you have a core character and some quirky side people, and eventually they get optioned. You know, like those Sue Grafton books, the any kind of the Kathy Reichs books. And here you have Jordan Manning as this news reporter who was kind of like blown up based on their last book where they were involved in uncovering a serial killer. And here they're trying to find this missing woman. Is she missing? If she is missing, why is she missing? What would motivate her to be missing? Did she run away? Was she murdered? Like, what is going on in this small town? And I feel like the book is just too close on Jordan Manning and is not doing much of anything to cast a light or to fill in the details of all of the people that she works with, the culture of being in a newsroom, like what it's like. None of that I feel is given the due that it's needed for this to like really be even just like a fun series of books, even if it's not anybody's like favorite book. Like, I understand wanting to do like a mystery detective-y kind of stories, but feature a news reporter. You know, you want to move away from like a detective, a police involvement. Like, okay, investigative reporter makes sense. Like, I feel like that's another natural fit for this kind of long running situational series or whatever. But I think because we're not getting any kind of attention paid to the characters that would enrich Jordan's life, this book just kind of fell really flat, and it wasn't necessarily the most enjoyable thing for me to read. The Black Girls Left Standing by Juliana Goodman, I gave 4 stars, and this follows the life of a teenage girl whose older sister has been murdered by the police. And so she is kind of like, why was my sister murdered by the police? Doesn't make any sense to me. And so we see that, and we also see her kind of processing this through art because she is an artist. And so we see her trying to both figure out like what her sister knew that got her killed, trying to find her sister's boyfriend because her sister's boyfriend was present as well, and he was not murdered, but he's kind of like ducked into hiding. And so it's very much that kind of a plot line. And so this was sent to me like a year, maybe even 2 years ago now, by the publisher. And it just took me a long time to get around to reading it. I think I had to have read this in, because Robin, Days of Afrekete, Ricki Wilde, Regina Black, Kate Ankrum. I think we're firmly in February because I was reading Black authors, Therese Bahari. So it was a Black author that I had, and I wanted to get around to it. And I'm happy that I gave it 4 stars. I think the ending of that book was really good. And for a book, you know, about a woman, about a girl whose older sister was murdered by the police, it definitely could have been a lot heavier of a story than I feel like it was. Like, it was appropriate to the tone was appropriate for the story that was being told, but it didn't necessarily like really weigh me down. There were moments of levity, and we did get flashback chapters so we could really understand the connection that these sisters had with one another. The Sunsets in Singapore by Kendi Felipe. I know I just butchered that, so I apologize. I feel bad because this is a book that I wanted to read. Like, I actively asked the publisher to send it to me on NetGalley because I thought it was a Monty book. We were following a group of Black women in Singapore as we kind of explore what it's like to be Black in that country, the connections they had with one another, the mess that they found themselves involved in. And I do think the book eventually found its footing. It wasn't the world's best book, but it did eventually kind of settle into something that was me. It was messy. The way that these characters were interconnected was something that I appreciate. There's nothing I hate more than seeing a group of characters that don't really feel like they're bound by anything. There's kind of 4 people loosely existing in a similar space. And that was not this book, but it also wasn't the greatest thing I've ever read. These women are brought together by this book club where they're supposed to read books by Black people, Black women specific. I did, like I said, I appreciated the women for what they were, but I was really let down because it just wasn't very good. And I was not able to pull out of the not very good because then I read Meet Cute Story by Emery Lee, and I have never hated something more in my life. Now listen, back like right before the pandemic, I feel like Emery Lee was getting whacked. Okay, I don't know what happened with Emery Lee. I don't know what they're like as a person, but I just distinctly remember them getting whacked, and it was like, maybe we are not supposed to read Emery Lee anymore. And having read this book, I I would not advise people to read Emery Lee. This book was horrible. So this was another book that I had specifically asked. It was on my Amazon wish list. A subscriber kindly sent it to me. I did check out the audiobook though. So here we have a story of our main character who people actually do hate. They hate this little person. They're a child, so I don't hate them, but we have Noah. Yes, Noah runs a Tumblr blog, right? And was the other one Elliot? Was that what it was? So we have Noah as our main character who is in Colorado living with his brother for the summer because they are currently moving. They being Noah, his family is moving. And so his parents are like, we're going to go house hunting. You're going to live with your brother for the summer. Everything's going to be good. Here's an emergency credit card. He racks up $400 in like 3 days. And his family is like, okay, we're cutting the credit card off. You need to go to work or something, but we're not going to be doing that. So thank you for playing, but go find something to do with your life. And in the process of job hunting, Noah meets Drew. Now, Drew is a cute boy at an ice cream parlor, and Noah runs this little Tumblr blog where he documents meet cute moments that happen with trans people, queer people. It used to be just in Miami, but obviously it's not Miami anymore. So he like takes the story, he manipulates it a little bit, he puts it up on his blog. The next day, he's going to an interview at a bookstore that he is not qualified for because Noah has never worked in his life and just has no kind of like basic understandings of when to lie. And so he runs into this cute boy again, except the cute boy is like, I know you run this blog because I read the blog, and you like the only person that knew about this interaction that happened at that, ice cream parlor with me and you just wrote about it. So clearly you run that blog. Like, what are the chances? And so eventually they start fake dating because Noah has been getting some hate on the blog. He's been getting like people questioning, like, is it real? Like, what is happening? And to be honest with you, I have been on Tumblr for a long time, longer than anybody should ever be on Tumblr. Well, not longer, but because there's definitely people who are around, before me, but I'm still over there. I still check in. My blog is still, it gets new posts every now and again. And so like, I feel like I've seen people on Tumblr, and I had the same criticism of Love, Simon, where it's just like, maybe people are having a very different Tumblr experience than I was having, but it's just a little bit unserious that all of this was happening, to Noah, and he was just so upset by everything that was happening, and to go to like the lengths of fake dating and giving this man the login information, talking about you're reblogging things for clout. It was a little bit too unserious, but they're fake dating. Noah eventually does get a job at the summer camp where his brother works, and that's where we meet Devin. And Devin and Noah start kind of having this flirtationship, and it's a little bit sad, becomes like push and pull because Drew is jealous of Devin, and Devin is like not giving two fucks about anything. And it was too unserious. I'm sorry. None of this book really worked for me. Like I said, this had to have been in a month where I was daily vlogging because it was February. And so I know that I talked to the patrons about how much I was hating this book. And even now, all these months later, I still hate this book. It's not very good. I don't recommend it. I understand why people were upset that in this book, I think it's Devin doesn't really or might be one of the characters in this book identifies using this terminology where they don't identify as gay. They identify as a person who likes masculine people, which is fine. Like, identify how you want to identify and like reclaim what you want to reclaim. But this specific term is like popularized by white gays who are white supremacists. And so to me, like, there's just some things I'm not really sure we need to reclaim. I can't really speak for the white gay community. Do what y'all want to do. But I just feel like if you're trying to reclaim something from white supremacists, you are going to get lumped in with them. Like, that is going to be a misunderstanding that happens. Like, do what you want to do. But if the only people who are spearheading this movement of using this terminology are white supremacists, like, you were kind of on your own. Like, I will not be marching with you there. But again, like, identify how you want to identify, but I think it's a little bit weird to do that. There's another scene where it was giving very much, like, I think it's Drew's dad was giving very much also like Blue Lives Matter, white supremacy. So it didn't rub my spirit the right way. And Noah was annoying, but Devin to me was also annoying. What did I say in my review? because a lot of people seem to like Devin as a character, and I wish that Devin was who we were following, but honestly, I wouldn't want that either. While Noah was annoying, Devin existed, it seemed, to give Noah everything they could ever want. Not in a romantic way, but in a doormat kind of way. It wasn't giving romance, it was giving respect yourself a little bit more. Because Devin was this character who, like I said, there's this push and pull where Drew was very jealous of Devin, but Devin doesn't give two fucks about anything. Doesn't give two fucks about Noah, doesn't give two fucks about themselves. Like, they're just vibing through life, which I think is respectable. But if I'm presented with the love triangle where one person is like giving white supremacy and the other character is giving, I really don't care, like, fuck me if you want to fuck me. It's just, I'm not rooting for either of you. You can't, like, in no world could Devin actually lead a story. So to me, it doesn't even make sense to be like, oh yes, give me the same book, but from their perspective. Because one, I do think it was giving, Noah has all kinds of racial identity, but for this multi-ethnic person to get kicked out of to the side, for you to follow Devin, a white male character, that to me is also very unserious. And it is giving racist from the readers. So to me, this book just didn't really work on any front. And I feel bad because like I said, I feel like Emily was already getting whacked. And so me to come back 4 or 5 years later and like spin the block and whack him again was a little bit unnecessary. But here we are. Such is the way of the world. Then I read Cynthia Williams's Scandalous Secrets, Jackson Falls #2. And this book was also very good. It was very good. It was also unserious, but it was unserious in the best possible way. Here we were following Zoe. So years and years and years ago, Zoe was in college. And while she was in college, she was in an abusive relationship. But it was fine because she had her bestie, Byron. Now, Byron was her bestie. And she was like, listen, Byron, I'm in a bit of a pickle here because I'm pregnant, but I do not want to stay with this man. Okay, I need you to help me out. And so many moons ago, Byron said, I got you, sis. And so he said that I'm the baby daddy in order to like help, get her out of this abusive relationship, provide cover. And she ran out of that situation. She got away. She was able to save herself and her unborn child. Currently, in the present, Zoe works at a plastics facility. I want to say she's kind of middle management or like just below middle management, trying to get that promotion to like really have a flourishing career for herself and her child. She has been a very cautious woman because the person that she was, engaged to was an abusive person. And I think they eventually went to jail. They were locked up, not for abuse, but for other crimes that they were committing or something. But in the present, Byron is also pretty high profile because not only does he come from a pretty well-known family in, I think this book is set in South Carolina, he is also running for Senate. He's running to be senator from the great state of South Carolina. And so in his desire, to not be blindsided by any information, the fact that he has this illegitimate child is brought to his attention, or alleged, he knows it's not his because, he and Zoe had this agreement. But the Oppo research team brings it to his attention, like, we were able to find this out about you. And so Zoe is coming back into his life to be like, yeah, he's not a bad person. Like, he's, you didn't know he was a dad, but we're going to make it work for his election campaign. But at the same time, Zoe's receiving these cryptic emails because, of course she is. She's receiving this email. She's trying to keep it on the down low. Doesn't really want to broadcast it too much because, she's been on her own this long. She's trying to be like, I can look after me and mine. And this was a really fun romance. It had everything I wanted. It had, a family of like wealth and status and a regular person. And it was kind of a second chance because Byron was harboring some feelings from those college days. And even Zoe was kind of harboring some feelings that they had to work through. But it was also fun because the daughter was old enough. She was like a teenager to like feel like a full character and like not just like a pet or overly precocious because an author is incapable of writing, a realistic child, a elementary school age person. So overall, like, this was a really good one. And I fully intend on continuing on with this series. I've checked out book 3 a couple of times since finishing book 2, mostly because book 3 follows the sister of Byron Robidoux, and I really liked her. She was honestly one of my favorite things about the whole book. And so knowing that she has a whole romance where I get to spend the whole book with her is really enticing. I just haven't gotten around to it, but I will. Just now, The Scandalous Secret, Cynthia Williams, y'all need to pick it up. After that, I picked up The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Wong, and I was gagged. Okay, I was gagged. This was on a day where I was running some errands. I had to like go to, I think I was picking up Walmart envelopes at Walmart, and then I stopped and had some Subway, and I was having a nice little time. Got some new clothes. It was very much that kind of a day, and I just wanted some background noise. So I said, "Emperor and the Endless Palace." That'll be some background noise. I had seen somebody pick it up or a negative review, something, and all I knew was that it was a fantasy romance, allegedly. And I like a fantasy book, and y'all, this is not a fantasy romance. Okay, it is not even a romance. And the fantasy is fantasying. I won't take it away, but it's definitely fantasy in the same way that I think like Greek retellings are often lumped in the fantasy category, just because so much of the fantasy elements of this are more myth, folklore kind of magic, not necessarily like we're inventing whole new worlds kind of magic, because it is still just it's really more of a sci-fi situation where it's like it's still our world, obviously, still very much Earth, but it's these two characters and their past lives together, because the story is these two characters fall in love with each other repeatedly over the centuries. And so we see them at three distinct points on that timeline that they spend with one another. This is definitely the book that I've also seen some people refer to this as erotica, just because there is a lot of sex in this book. And listen, I still think about this time in this book where a character was getting head from a person who had a razor blade hidden under their tongue, and they could feel the cool metal of the razor against their erection. Like, it has not left my mind. Okay. Like, it is still present. Sometimes I'm just like at work and I think about that scene, and I'm like, I really listened to that while I was putting away dishes. I was putting away some sheet pans, listening to this man spinning a razor blade. It was a lot. It's a lot. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and act as though there is not a copious, like, it's definitely actually, I don't think it's the horniest book. I think, like I said, it has the most sex of any book I've ever read in my entire existence on this platform. But I don't think it's erotica. I think that all of the sex in this book actively served a purpose, and the purpose was not to titillate the reader. It was not to give porn to the reader. It really did show the connection between characters in the scene, or visually moving something forward. It really was artistic. And so I think that to label this erotica, well, erotica is, perfectly valid genre, is not what this book was. Not what this book was. It just happened to have a lot of sex scenes in it. And so do know that. Do know that some of the sex in this book is it's dubious. Is there consent? Is there not consent? Like, what is happening here? It's very interesting. But I think that the connection between the two characters over their lives, also really engrossing. Love to see it. I was always wanting to, there's never any timeline in this book I did not want to go to. Sometimes, you read a book, it has multiple perspectives, it has multiple timelines, and you're like, I don't give two fucks about the timeline where you're an innkeeper. I was invested in the innkeeper timeline. I was invested in the palace intrigue. Are you the concubine timeline? I was invested in the modern day timeline where you were, a failure to your parents because you kind of wanted to not really be a doctor, and you went to this rave and you met this guy who gave you a water bottle. Like, in all three timelines of their lives together, I was invested in these characters. And so there wasn't any of that. There wasn't like, I just want the book to be over. I was engrossed. I spent my entire day listening to this book, and it was excellent from start to finish. And I do recommend it to people, just because I think y'all need to read it. It's just excellence. Now, like I said, it's not a fantasy romance. It's not even a romance. And the fantasy is questionable. It is a love story. It's a tale of people in love with one another. But it's also a little bit more than that, and a little bit more complicated than that. And I think that Justinian Wong was able to really do something inventive with that I did not expect them to do. Then I turned my attention to Mariana Zapata, and you can kind of see it hanging out in the background there. All roads lead here. I listened to that also I think it was from Audible. And I think I wound up liking this a little bit more than The Wall of One Peg and Me, partially because the third act sex scene was not confusing as to why you were doing this when she was asleep. So I like that in All Roads Lead Here. But I don't know if I believe necessarily this is a romance. So in this one, I will say this is a character who's a songwriter. No one told me that. Nobody told me that Aurora from All Roads Lead Here was famous adjacent. That at the beginning of the book, she is leaving a long-term relationship with the celebrity that she was dating in order to go back to her old hometown where her mother went missing many moons ago. That's what's happening here. Her mother went missing as a child. She was raised by her family out of state. And now as an adult with some settlement money, she is going back to her hometown, in part to like hike the surrounding trails that her mother was on, but also just to feel close to her again because, you know, it's her hometown. And it's here that she meets Rhodes and Rhodes' son, and the kind of interesting family dynamics at play with Rhodes and his son. I like that a lot. I don't think I've ever read a story where like that was a family dynamic, and so I think that Mariana Zapata was like really highlighting a family dynamic that I think is perfectly valid and fun. It's not necessarily the traditional take on a single dad romance, so like that was at play. And then, like I said, like Aurora is famous adjacent, and y'all know I love a famous adjacent woman. But my issue with this one was that I don't really feel like the scenes between Rhodes and Aurora were really romantic. Like there are scenes where he's teaching her, you know, the what to be on the lookout for, and she's going on these hikes, and she eventually gets a job at like an outdoor, like an REI type place. And so he's like helping her, you know, with terminology that she's gonna know, and like where she should suggest people go hiking or where they should go fishing or like what is stocked in the various, you know, lakes and things, because Rhodes is a wildlife game warden. And so he's like knowledgeable about the area. And so she's trying to be a better salesperson, her REI job. And it's just like, it's fine. Like the scenes are there. I think that it's not that Mariana Zapata doesn't put in the work. It just, for me, I didn't believe in the chemistry. Like I didn't see them as really being a romantic couple, but I did like them. I liked how Aurora fit into the dynamic, like her and Rhodes' son Ames, or was it Amos? Her and Amos. I liked it all, but to me, it never really finished. Like we didn't cross the finish line into true blue romance. But I do like Mariana Zapata. I do like that she gives us a lot. There's a lot of meat on the bones in her stories. Rhodes, Amos, Aurora, even Maurice friend, I think it was Yuki. All these people felt like fully realized individuals. And I appreciate that in a romance novel. You're not going to make me upset about that. Then listen to The Stars in Your Eyes by Case and Callender. Listen, speaking of authors that were getting whacked back in the day. So back in the day, Case and Callender decided they needed to get on medium.com/Case and Callender and write this little post because can I call Mina my good friend? I'm going to say it. My good friend Mina. I think it was one of their tweets that kind of just, you know, tweeted out into the ether because it's a thing that we're still talking about all these fucking years later, the third act breakup. And, you know, we're complaining on Twitter at the time about the third act breakup. And Mina tweeted this off. And Case and Callender came back, even though Case and Callender is written like one romance book. This is kind of an epic love story that no one's ever read. It was for children. It's not even very good. But Case and Callender came back and they were upset that like readers just don't fucking understand. We're all fucking stupid. And, you know, genre conventions exist and authors are able to do genre convention actually, and their like breakups are valid or some bullshit in this little Medium post. And I just thought that there was also just like this sense of like an empty wagon will make a whole lot of noise. Where it's like at the time, I feel like we all know Mina to be the romance girly. We all know her to read the romance. So I think that the person who reads romance is not an empty wagon making a lot of noise. They're a person in the space, a reviewer in the space, reviewing the space and making a commentary on it. That had nothing to do with Case and Callender, and Case and Callender just kind of wanted to put themselves in the mix. And so I saw on Goodreads that Mina was reading this. And so I was like, well, if Mina has forgiven Case and Callender, then clearly, I should read this book, even though I did not like Felix Ever After. I did not like it's kind of an epic love story. And I said, you know, this is a Monty book. So I made it my Patreon quarterly book club book because it's about this actor and this other actor falling in love with one another. And so I said, this isn't a Monty book. And if, you know, Mina has forgiven this person who was calling them an empty wagon, making a whole lot of noise, then I can read the book and I can give it a fair shot. And y'all, this book is bad. It is just a god awful book. Okay. It is not very good. The characters are very flat. Speaking of a book that features sexual assault, childhood sexual assault, I think that it was not very well handled. It felt very gross to me the way that it was discussed. The overall story between these two characters just was also foolish. We're following a character who has been famous since they were young, They grew up in this Hollywood acting family, and they are currently they're on the downward spiral. Okay, they are not. They're not. It's not like people really want to work with this particular actor. And then we have another actor who is like fresh on the scene, new face, and they agree that in order to save the movie and some comments that were made beforehand, they're going to pretend to be together and see how that works out for them. And there is a scene in this book where I have to watch a character nearly get raped. And it was too much, to be honest with you. And I've read a lot. Okay. I've read a lot of books. I've seen a lot of, assaults happening on the page. Sometimes I was like, in this book, I was not prepared for it, but I've encountered that in my reading life. And I was able to look past that and be like, the author was really able to handle that scene fine. But here it was just so disgusting. And the way that race was weaponized was very strange to me. And also the fact that both of these characters are like light-skinned biracials does not escape me. Listen, as a biracial person, I see how do I want to say this? As a biracial person, like I understand that, not every biracial is created equally, it's just, it is what it is. Not every biracial is out there experiencing life in the same way. But for these people who were being compared, like, to be honest with you, these people were fucking logic. Okay. Like they were logic levels of biracial. And so some of the time that they were discussing like their careers in Hollywood, I was like, for the one character, it's like, okay, you have a famous director, your daddy has Oscars. So like everyone knows that because as the good sis Kimberly says, like passing only works if nobody knows your family. Like if nobody knows who you are, then you can pass. Like maybe you could get away with it. But everybody knows that your daddy is that dark-skinned black man with, 2 Oscars or whatever it was. So that one actor who had been famous his whole life, he was never going to pass. People are always going to associate him with blackness, no matter like what he looked like, even though he was walking around looking like logic. So that one I got. The fresh face up and comer, I was just like, you are 100% only getting opportunities because you're light skinned. And like, it was just very strange. And then for the end of the book to be like, oh, our Nepo baby character is like this violent, aggressive black man who attacked this white actor, even though this white actor was trying to rape him. It was a lot. It was a lot to handle in the book that I don't think was prepared to do that, which is wild because none of these things needed to be there. This attempted rape and the blackmailing, and it didn't need to happen. Didn't need to happen. This little white actress using this man for like leverage her own career also was not really explored to the extent that it should have been explored if that was what you wanted to do. But also, if these are storylines you wanted to create, I don't think they necessarily find their home in a romance book. Like some of these plot lines are just not destined for the vehicle in which Case and Calendar decided to attempt to deliver them. And then to deliver them so poorly, I think was a gross miscarriage of justice for the characters that they penned. So all the characters in this book deserved better, but also the racial politics of this book were just a little bit sketch for me. Speaking of sketchy racial politics, I then read Robin Lee's The Idea of You because the movie is out now, but at the time that I read it, it was still, we were waiting. I think it had been at South by Southwest at that point, and so like people had already been talking positively, but the general public had not seen it. And I feel like I was in the first wave of people to discover that Robin Lee was a black woman. I do think that there is something to be said for the fact that like her face, I didn't see her face, the author's face, in any kind of image, interviews before the movie came out. And since the movie's been released, it's her face and Gabrielle Union, who, co-produced the movie. Her production company was involved in the making of the movie, and both of them worked on Deliverance from Eve, I believe. Her face has been everywhere, and they've been talking to this woman nonstop. But before the movie came out, it was really just Anne and Nick out there doing a lot of the legwork. I've seen this described as Harry Styles fan fiction, One Direction fan fiction, which is why I will say I was interested to see, like, is that true? And then when I saw there was a black woman that wrote it, I was kind of gagged. And then the more I read of the book, I just don't really feel like that's the case. Robin Lee has, at least in headlines, said that she regrets saying that the book was inspired by Harry Styles. I don't really know the extent to that. But this is the story of Selene, who falls in love with Hayes Campbell. They meet backstage at a concert, and the movie is at Coachella. I do think the movie handles this, like the meeting and everything, a little bit better than the book, because they get to have a meeting before it's just a better, like, I feel like the movie knows what it's trying to do, and I feel like the book was very clearly trying to do something different. I think the book was attempting to be more literary fiction, and it kind of got lumped into the romance category. And just based on the headlines of interviews I've seen from Robin Lee, I do think that's to her. I don't think she likes that. I think there's been interviews where she doesn't like the ending being changed for the movie, because the movie does give it more of that rom-com, rom-drama conclusion. Like, you get a happiness there that you do not get in this book. Speaking of plot lines that I feel like the author was not really capable of handling very well, in the book there are a couple of scenes that are just a little bit weird. There's a scene where the rest of the band like invites this girl back to the hotel, and we find out later that this girl was like 16 years old, and that's when it's like one of the building pieces in Celine not really thinking that her and Hayes are going to work out, because Hayes is like very much like, we need to shut this shit down like right now. Why did you even talk to that girl? We can't help that girl. Like, we can't have anything to do with her. Like, you can't pay for, like, it was very much like, these are people who are never going to work out. And just based on like each chapter is in a new city and a new time, these two people are like hooking up or wishing they could be together when they can't be together. It's very much the story of a woman who was coming out of a marriage from a man who did not appreciate her, who left her. And now she has her daughter, and so she is, she's refining herself. At the start of the book, she's supposed to go on this artist retreat to like recenter her life after the divorce. And so instead of being able to recenter herself after this divorce, she finds herself in another whirlwind romance, which is reminiscent of when she was in college and she met her husband, and then it was this whirlwind thing, and they were pregnant and they were a family, and then her life was, the life that she had built for herself was pulled out from under her because of this divorce and this affair. And so it's very much a similar kind of like repeating cycle in the book. And I think that because it's being, it was marketed maybe as a romance, when you look it up on Goodreads, it's in the romance category for the Goodreads Choice Awards of that year. It's really easy to say this is a bad book just based on genre conventions, because it's not a romance at all. It's literary fiction. It's, casual general fiction at best. And so I think that story it doesn't hit as hard in the book. It like I said, it's a lot of sex in new locations. It's a lot of like very obvious conversations about fame and being ready for fame, and the differences between the two of these people in their lives and like where they are, and like it's not, I don't think the book is really meant to be seen as romantic. And so to take that book and turn it into a rom-com, I can see why you would do that. And I think that the movie is better for doing that than I think the book having kind of like one foot in both worlds and doing neither of them really well. But I don't regret that I read the book. I was happy to have read the book before the movie came out, but I don't think I will revisit it. Then I read The Partner Plot by Christina Forrest. We have another Lily Reads Book Club book in the mix. I've been good this year. Okay, I've read all of the books, and some of the books I've read early. Like Ricki Forrest, I read early. The Partner Plot, I read early. So like, I'm on top of it, y'all. I'm a good book club member. But this book was not very good to me. We're following Violet, who is supposed to be in Vegas doing work. She is a stylist. She's a stylist at the stars. And she has one really steady client that she has been working with for a while. And while she is in Vegas, she runs into her old high school boyfriend. One thing leads to another, and they wake up the next morning thinking they were engaged, thinking they were married, thinking they consummated the marriage. And while maybe they didn't consummate the marriage, there's also nothing to consummate, because they got the fake wedding package where nothing was legally binding. And they're just like, wow, that was a crazy night. And they go back home to live their lives. Here's the thing. In the first book in the series, Violet was engaged to her kind of another person in the industry. I think he was like a producer or a manager man. And at the end of that first book, she was dumped at the altar, or like right before they were supposed to walk down the aisle, for another rapper. And so while she was, in the high of doing all of this, great career work, she is now up for this like Forbes 30 under 30-esque list. And so she goes home from this wedding in Vegas, and she goes to this interview where it's brought up like, hey, you were, just recently engaged. Like, what is it like for you to like not be engaged to that man anymore? And she blurts out that she's actually married. Meanwhile, you have the love interest, whose name I can't be bothered to remember. I think it's like Xavier. Xavier goes home, and he is an English teacher. He's also the assistant basketball coach, and he kind of wants to leave his current position to go coach basketball at Rice University. The only issue is the head coach there, who he'd be working under, only wants to hire him if he's like serious about sticking around, and he doesn't trust that Xavier's serious because Xavier is single. Now, I don't know about you, but it is a crime in the state of New Jersey to not hire somebody based on their marital status. It's kind of a crime to do that. So we're participating in discrimination. So honestly, Xavier should just school to Rice University, because half of the shit this head coach was saying to him was in text messages. So there is definitely documentary evidence. It would be a very open and shut case. Like, probably wouldn't even need to get to a judge. Like, you could handle this shit in arbitration. So Xavier could really be set for life, but he didn't do none of that. Instead, he says, "Oh, I'm married." And so Xavier and Violet both find themselves lying, only Violet's lie gets printed in a magazine. And because she is back home because she broke her ankle on the way out of that interview, he is able to confront her in person and continue the charade where he's like, "Well, you said your lie. I need you to back up my lie because I'm having dinner with this head coach." But then we meet the head coach, and he's giving very clear racist vibe. It's giving like caricature of a racist, to be honest with you. But we're going to continue the lie. The issue here is that Xavier and Violet just had no chemistry. The entire basis of the reader wanting them to be back together is based on the prologue where we saw them in high school. In the present, in the actual story, they don't really have a whole lot going on. It's very boring. You kind of get the same scene twice in some instances, because we do get dual perspective in a way that I don't think is utilized to its best situation. And I also just felt that Xavier wasn't going anywhere. He just had no drive to do anything. He was very much coasting through life, which is fine if you're a person behind like you people behind the camera. Y'all could just be coasting through life, and there's nothing against you. But a book, I should feel, if I'm reading a story, I want to read a story about a person doing something or having interesting thoughts. Xavier has no interesting thoughts, and he's not doing anything. And so for him to be a perspective for half of the book it was really grinding on my gears. And I really did appreciate Violet, because you could see she was actively moving upwards in her career. Like, she was conquering bigger and better tasks. She had a vision of what she was going to be doing, and she had steps she was taking to achieve those dreams of hers. And so for me, it felt like Xavier was a lead weight around her, and was like trying to drag her back to our high school hometown to live behind the post office in this cramped little apartment and be raggedy together and be miserable, but they would be together, so be fine. It was giving very much like I flamed out too soon. I had a career ending injury as a child, and I'm going to recapture all of my lost glory by getting to be with my high school sweetheart. And it was just really sad and pathetic, and I didn't root for it, and I didn't want it, and I did not like the book. But it was fine, because then it was immediately saved by Colton Gentry's third act by Jeff Zettner. This book is so good. 5 out of 5 stars. It's another second chance romance. We're following Colton Gentry, who is a washed up country music artist. And we see him from his high school days to seeing why he is a washed up country artist, and the relationship that he had as a high schooler, and how he runs into this woman again as an adult, trying to turn his life around, trying to find out what he is going to be doing with the rest of his life, trying to get back upon his feet after the death of his best friend. It is some of the most heartwarming connections, like male friendships, that I've read in a book. It has a truly swoon-worthy, I'm rooting for y'all romance, both in the past and in the present. And the book needs more love. It needs more love. Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose was a book I picked up from Libro FM because I'd been on such a romance kick. I was like, I need something different. The book is bad. It's not very good. It's siblings coming home, figuring out, what they're going to do now that their mom is dead. They're packing up the house. They discover that their mom maybe hit a body with their father in their childhood. And so now it's these siblings trying to figure out, are our parents murderers? Are they not murderers? Do we need to clear their name? Like, a lot going on here. It just wasn't very good. Hope by Andrew Ridker. I saw Kenya haul this or talk about it in maybe an anticipated, a TBR, somewhere. This got put on my radar, and eventually my library hold came in on this book, and it was so good. I don't know what to tell y'all. 5 out of 5 stars. This is a kind of a book that it does remind me of the things that I liked about The Hole We're In by Gabrielle Zevin, or even Crossroads by Franzen. But this book is a look at what happens when this professor, is he a professor? No, he's a doctor. So this doctor who was head of the family, and we find out that he has been doing some light medical fraud. And so that has a impact on the rest of his family. And so we get to see his wife, his children, where they are in their life. And it is a family story. It's a character story. It's not really a plot story, but so good. So good. Just go read the book. Go read the book, please. Then I listened to Funny Story by Emily Henry, And I'm sorry, but they were raggedy. They were very raggedy, but they were following Daphne. Daphne is a children's librarian in the great state of Michigan. And before the start of the story, she was engaged. She was happily engaged. She was, going to live her life for the rest of her life with her fiance, Peter. And then Peter went on his bachelor's trip where he hooked up with his best friend, Petra. Now, I do think that Daphne is a bit of an idiot, not a little bit too stupid to function here, because she was living her life thinking that Peter and Petra just had no feelings for one another. And I think that if you are an engaged person and your significant other goes on a vacation with their, long-term friend, but they are attracted to the gender of that friend, then you are a little bit stupid. I'm sorry. I think you're a little bit stupid to think that nothing was going to happen on that trip. I think it was very stupid of you to move into a home that you let Peter purchase before you were married, that your name was not on the deed, talking about, oh, I have bad credit. Don't care. I don't think you should. If you are a married person, in my spirit, I do think that you should not be moving into a home that your name is not on the deed to. If you are not on the mortgage, I don't really know if you should be moving into that home as a married person. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's silly of me, but I can't imagine that. Like, why would you want, like, how are you going to live in a house that's not yours? But like I said, she gets kicked to the curb, and now she's living with Petra's old fiance, Miles. Miles is a bit of a pothead. He is a bartender. He works at a fancy vineyard winery place, living his best life over there, doing his little thing. And so one day, eventually after months of living together, before the start of the book, we see Daphne and Miles kind of have a night together because an invitation comes in the mail to the Peter Petra wedding, and they decide that we're going to go get drunk, which I think is reasonable because they're still not over this breakup. I think they're not over it yet. It makes sense. Y'all are going to go out, get drunk. They come back, and the next morning they realize they've RSVP'd to this event, and they have agreed to arrive. And it must be like a digital situation because Peter is very quick to call Daphne. He's like, hey, I saw that you RSVP'd. You don't need to come. And Daphne quickly doubles down on this and says, actually, I did this. It's not going to be awkward. I'm bringing a +1. You actually know them. They also got invitations, so you won't even need to order anything extra because I'm bringing Miles. And so I think the problem for this book for me was that it was predicated on this idea that Daphne and Miles were going to be fake dating leading up to the Peter Petra wedding. And that's not all what happens in this book. There's really no narrative reason for Peter and Petra to fake date one another. It comes up a couple of times that they're fake dating, but every time it comes up, both of them are very quick to tell everybody that they're not fake dating. I think it was Ashley, her coworker, is the first person to find out, and Ashley's immediately told they're fake dating. Miles' sister, Julia, comes. She's immediately told they're fake dating. Everybody in this little town is told they're fake dating to the point where Peter and Petra not knowing and them acting jealous at events that they're supposed to act jealous at honestly doesn't make any logical sense because everybody in town knows they're fake dating and everyone in town has no reason to keep this secret from Peter and Petra. And so it kind of doesn't serve a purpose. And then what we're really building towards is Daphne leaving after she throws this fundraiser for the library because in her mind, she thinks she's going to go live closer to her mother because she doesn't have any friends in the town. But obviously over the course of the story, she makes connections to the people because before this, she was only really friends with Peter's friends. And so now that she has friends of her own and she has Miles, she has a reason to stay in the town. So the Peter Petra wedding has nothing to do with the plot. Them fake dating has nothing to do with the plot. And so these kind of feel like things that were thrown in order to market the book. And honestly, it feels a little bit silly because at this point in her career, in her romance career at least, Emily Henry, I think, is a little bit above that. And I think that in order, putting that in the story and letting that be what was leading the marketing it honestly feels gross, to be honest. It feels very disgusting for that to have been what was the point of this. And I also feel like it continues to cheapen the fake dating storyline, which has everybody by the throats. So, and it just felt like a thing to throw in for trope marketing, and then the trope that you threw in for the trope marketing isn't even present in the story. So, didn't like that one too much at all. And then I listened to The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. Again, I was trying to continue this, I need something that's not a romance. I'm reading a lot of romance. Give me something, a little palate cleanser, if you will. Rachel Hawkins ate this up. She ate it up. For this book to be not even 300 pages, it's barely 200 pages. she really ate. Here we're following a woman who is going back to her husband's childhood home because we find out that his adoptive mother is dead. She died. She left him some things. They're going to go clear up what is happening here. She's been dead for a while at the start of the story, actually. So I guess they're going home to do repairs on the childhood home, that kind of a thing. And over the course of the story, we kind of understand who this woman was, who this titular heiress is, her relationship to the rest of the family, and the contentious relationship they all had with one another. Is she who everyone thought she was? Is she not who she thought she was? Did she have a right to be there? Lots of interesting dynamics in terms of like revenge. And for as complicated as the story wound up being, for it to be so short, and for it to be so intricate, and for it to be really pack a punch, I was kind of gagged. Like, even if this isn't anybody's like favorite book, because I don't think it's really a mystery necessarily. It's more mystery-esque than it is like, you know, high octane thriller. But for it to be all of that, like this like tightly wound ball of tension and character and motivation, I was gagged. So I think I gave it 4. Maybe did I give it 5? Let's see. I gave it 4 stars because part of me wanted it to be longer, but it couldn't be. Like, there was no way for it to be longer than it was. But sometimes wants are irrational. Then I listened to How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong, and y'all are hating this book. Y'all are hating and dragging this book. And to be honest with you, I think you guys just don't see the vision. You don't see the vision. I think I gave this full 5 stars because I did. I'm looking at it now. And here we have... Now, I will say that I am biased because y'all know I do love a story about characters who are in show business. And so when I saw these characters were in show business, I love it. I love even more that I was able to get a copy before it became a Reese's Book Club pick and it got that ugly Reese's Book Club sticker. Like, I always say that I don't want the stick. Like, I hate this discourse around stickers, but whenever I get a book before the sticker is put on it, I am happy, not gonna lie. I got the Yellow Face without the sticker. I got How to End a Love Story without the sticker. Like, I am winning when it comes to the Reese's stickers. Anyway, here we're following Helen and Grant. Now, years and years and years ago, Helen's sister committed suicide. She jumped off a bridge, stepped into the road, into oncoming traffic, and Grant was the person who was driving the car that ultimately struck Helen's sister. And so Helen's family has like never really forgiven Grant for what happened. And Helen has never really forgiven Grant for what happened, even though Helen specifically understands like logically that Grant wasn't, I mean, he was the cause, yes, but it wasn't because of her. Like, it wasn't like he didn't set out to murder anybody. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so the book starts, and Helen is a successful author. She's wrote this series of YA books that are very popular, and she is riding this high because they're getting adapted, and she gets to be in the writer's room. So she's going to be a screenwriter, and she's moving to LA, and the studio is putting her up in an apartment, and she's just living the high life. And then you have Grant, who has been in screenwriting for years. Like, he has just worked on a number of shows. He is like Hollywood is his thing. He's originally from the East Coast, and so he's on the West Coast. He has a fresh start. He's not really bagged down by the baggage of his teenage years. Lo and behold, Grant and Helen are in the same writer's room. And for a while, Helen and Grant just kind of they agree to coexist. They're going to get through their job. They're going to do their work, and they're just going to move on with their lives. It's not important for them to really be best friends with one another. They can coexist. And that quickly turns into a physical relationship. And I've seen some reviews not appreciate this, that they wanted something more to happen here. And to be honest with you, I feel like it worked in the context of what was happening in the story and the motivations each character had for entering into this relationship with one another. I think that it works. I think that it actually makes sense. I think that it felt right. I think that it made sense for them to be able to be physically intimate. There was to act on their mutual attraction to one another while still not really trying to be vulnerable emotionally with one another, because then eventually they do become emotional with one another. It's like peeling back layers. Like, it's an onion. Like, there's going to be layers and layers to this. And this is a story about grief, but it's also a story about forgiveness and love, and that all of these things can happen at the same time. Like, people contain multitudes, and I think that this idea that you are just going to be consumed by a singular emotion is fun and interesting, but it's also very childish. And people can have complex ideas about a person and hold multiple things to be true at the same time. And I think this was an exploration of that, and it was messy and it was complicated, but these felt like real people doing, feeling real emotions. And I can understand why this wouldn't be a book for everybody. Like, I don't expect everybody to give this book 5 out of 5 stars. And I can also see people who are seeing, the multitudes and still not vibing with it. Like, but at the same time, just reading some of the reviews, it was giving like, we just didn't read the same book. We just very clearly did not read the same book. You processed something completely different than what I was processing, and that's fine. And I love that for you. But for me, How to End a Love Story was 5 out of 5 stars. And I followed it up with another. I think I also gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Did I? I did. Forget Me Not, Julie Soto. I see why y'all were. This book was everywhere. Okay, 2023. Everyone was reading this book. Everyone was giving it 5 stars. Everyone was gagged, and I'm part of the everybody. Okay. Like, this is a story of our main character who is she is a wedding planner. She's a wedding planner living in Sacramento, and she has just gotten the dream wedding of this influencer. And so her and her wife want this Sacramento wedding, and it's our main character's first big wedding. It does mean that she's gonna have to work with the florist that she doesn't work with anymore, but she's also like, I'm gonna put this professional. Like, I think that if you liked Forget Me Not, I think it's almost impossible to also like hate How to End a Love Story, because I feel like they're both complicated in not necessarily the same ways, because nobody in Forget Me Not was murdered. Like, nobody died in Forget Me Not, but I feel like they're equally complex romantic connections and like tension and characters. But maybe that's just me. Maybe this is me being optimistic, but Forget Me Not, the florist and the wedding planner, they're working together. We're seeing their history in the past, because we get the past chapters from our male main character. And then in the present, we get our female main character. And eventually they kind of coalesce and line up again. And so we understand the relationship they used to have, and we get to see the relationship they are currently having, and how it's similar but evolved, and how sometimes it goes back to what they had. But it's, again, there's this tension, there's this pull in it. And again, it feels very human. The characters are complex, like the side characters. They feel fully fleshed out, or like real people. So Forget Me Not, I was never going to, when I was reading this book, I was like, I don't think I'm going to read that other book they have coming out with the cellist on the cover. But by the end of this book, I said I'm going to read it, partially because the cellist makes a brief cameo at the end of this book in the wedding. But I'm excited. I'm excited for Julie Soto. Oh boy. Y'all gonna hate me for this one. I read To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chong. I did not hate this book the way I have seen y'all hate this book. I just didn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Now, I do think that the book has some flaws. And I do think that Molly was a little bit messy in the way that they promoted this book. I also really don't want to take away from any of the other people of like Manchurian descent who are uncomfortable with even just the idea of some of the romantic elements of this story. And it's not that I was sitting here rooting for the romance, because to me, I do think the romance of this book is the second weakest element of this book. But I don't think you have to love it. But I do think it's a little bit disingenuous. Don't want to call it disingenuous, no. But I think that to take away for the only takeaway to be that this is like a colonizer romance does feel a little bit. It does feel a bit reductive. It just does. It also feels like a continuation of this, like, we need to be moralizing everything that we're reading. And to an extent, I kind of understand, but at the same time, like, I'm just not on that wagon. or maybe I'm moving away from, I don't know. But I do think that the story that was actually written in this book was a compelling first entry. So I gave it 2 stars. I did not hate this book. We're following a character, Ring, who is an orphan. Their parents are dead and gone. Their sister is an addict to this drug that the Romans have brought over to subdue the native, I think we're in like Pangala. It's not China, but it might as well be China. Don't ask me to name this country because I couldn't do it. We're following her and her, I think it's her grandmother. So it's her grandmother, Ying's sister, and Yang. They're living in this little house. They're from a lesser noble family, but their wealth has kind of been eradicated just based on what was happening. 20 years before the start of the story is when the Romans appeared. There was a rift in the sky and the Romans came through. So there is a little bit of a sci-fi element. Now, I don't think that it's a stretch or a spoiler to say that I feel as though the Romans came from an earth not too dissimilar from our own, where they're currently experiencing ecological collapse. Okay, like they've polluted for too long. Their science, just like our sciences, have like ruined Earth, and they are looking for a planet that is hospitable to life. And in the search for the planet hospitable to life, they opened a portal, and this portal happened to lead them to this country that our main character is living in. And just based on the, scientific progress of our main character, I do think that this part of the book is a little bit unserious, a little bit minimizing, a little bit not as complex as it could be, but that's true for a lot of fantasy books that are written today. So at this point, it is what it is. The country is overrun by the Romans in a matter of hours, and the Roman emperor, and not trying to have his people completely genocided and massacred, comes up with an agreement with the invading forces, with the Romans, and they have this shaky kind of tenuous agreement that our main character has lived under for the entirety of their existence as a human on this planet. They did not know a time really before the Romans invaded, and after the Romans invaded, a lot of the culture has changed or has been, moved to whisper networks that our main character is not really a part of, because it's just not, they're not part of that. And so over the course of the story, at the beginning, we are seeing Ying she is very clearly against the Romans. And I do think this heel turn is kind of where a lot of readers get lost, because at the beginning of the book, we see Ying trying to get the drug her sister needs, and she's helped by a childhood friend who is like a descendant of the current emperor, but he was born from the wrong woman, and so like he'll never take the throne, but he is he's kind of working the fence. He is working with the Romans, but he's also not, and you can see that this kind of disgusts Ying, who's like, how could you ever work with them? Like, why would you even give them the time of day? Like, they're a horrible invading force, like you should hate them. And I think that a lot of people, and I think it's partially because in the book, it's always like, I'm doing this for my family, doing this for my family, doing this for my family, because eventually Ying is captured and she is turned into an assassin for the crown prince, Antony. And again, like her inner mantra is always like, my family, my family, my family, do this for my family. And honestly, I just think that it's easy for me to sit here and be like, I would say fuck the Romans no matter what was happening. But I do think the strategy changes when you are then captured and the threat of death really becomes real. And it's not as though Ying was really a revolutionary before. Like, it's real easy to be the revolutionary until you got the gun. And, some people are not going to buck under the pressure. Some people are still going to say, fuck the Romans, and then they die. But I think that it was interesting to see her, the rationalizations that Ying has to make over the course of the story. And it wasn't necessarily contradictory or hypocrisy to me. It was a little bit foolish. Like, I do think that she was a fool. And it wasn't even so much she was being manipulated as it was her manipulating herself, which I do think is a part of the colonizing. And I do think that the romance, like I said, does the strongest part of the romance comes into play towards the middle part of the second act into the last part of the book, where Antony, having spent so much time having her, systematically murdering people, is going on this diplomatic mission to another country. And he's like, I need you to come with me because I'm going to have you kill the emperor of this other country. And so it's really in this part of the book, I think the romance comes in to be like the focal point, like it really, the lens, shifts and it crystallizes in the text. And so they're on this mission, and it just kind of doesn't work. But I feel like also as soon as that romance is brought into stark relief, it kind of cracks, because it also forces Ruying to really confront what she's been doing and to really see what it is, and to see that Antony has been, I don't want to say manipulating, but she has been allowing herself to be used in a way that she also wouldn't have approved of she doesn't approve at the beginning. And it is a moment of like self-reflection that she has been doing all of these things that she doesn't agree with, and she has been, she finds herself attracted to this man and potentially in love with this man that had no interest in like actively returning any of that. Like, it all was a game to him. And you see her wrestling with this idea, and then the book ends, and I think in a very clear way that the name of the second book being To Kill a Monstrous Prince like makes sense. And so I do think that some of the promotion and the marketing in this book definitely played into this idea that like the whole book is this romance between this man and this woman, and him, this white man coming to Asia and colonizing these people. But I think the actual text of the book is a little bit deeper than that. Not much deeper, because I don't think it's an amazing text by any means. Like, I think that people can still have an issue with this book and not really be in love with it. But to me, and Natalie Naudus will also, to give credit where credit is due, Natalie Naudus can make me really fall in love with the text that I am not feeling. I do think that she elevates something in an author's work just by being the audiobook narrator. So it's very true that I could have read this book physically and not had the reaction to the text that I did, but I did not hate this book. And I think that, I don't say hated this book has been overblown, but like maybe a teensy bit, a little, I don't know. Like all great things, I do think that my relationship with the good doctor professor has finally hit a road bump. It's been smooth sailing since the novella days. The novellas were really iffy. But Not in Love is Ali Hazelwood's worst book. Like, this was hot trash garbage. I did not like a single second that I spent reading this book. It's honestly a travesty that it was even published. It's going to be published this June. So I say that to say that, like, thank you to Berkeley for sending to me. And Berkeley has been very kind about giving me Ali Hazelwood's novels in advance. Like, even though I'm such a small channel and my content is so irregular, but ever since Love on the Brain, it's like not been denied. So thank you to them. And I was really looking forward to this. Like, I saw that we were finally getting dual perspective from Ali Hazelwood, and I was over the moon excited. But this book was so bad. Nothing about this was enjoyable. I didn't like the setup. I didn't like the premise. Didn't like the characters. Didn't like what they were doing. This is also Ali Hazelwood's horniest book. Like, as much as I was out here defending The Emperor in the Endless Palace, this book is her horniest book. It's the one where she is delving into consent has always been a theme in all of Ali Hazelwood's books. Like, it's always enthusiastic and present. But besides that, it also becomes sort of like a take on like dominance and submission and like some kinkier elements. It's not the kinkiest, filthiest book, but even, I wasn't expecting all that from Ali Hazelwood. It was, I feel like fan fiction smut also tends to like lean in this like kinkier direction than romance book smut, at least in terms of like mainstream smut fic is probably going to be far kinkier than your mainstream smut scene in a romance novel. And I feel like you could definitely see the fan fiction roots coming out to play in Not in Love and some of the sex scenes. And it just wasn't really working for me personally as a reader. I can see people enjoying this book. I just wasn't one of them. I didn't like our main character. I felt she was a little bit pitiful. The man in this book, getting his perspective, we really could have cut it. We really could have cut it for all we learned about him and what he was doing. I did like the plot, because also will say that Ali Hazelwood will give you a plot. She does have a nice little through line through the book about this corporate takeover, the motivations for why this investment firm, this hedge fund people are looking into the business that our female main character is working at. And I think that was really compelling stuff, and it wasn't for that. And I did guess what was happening and like the connections, but I was able to guess it because Ali Hazelwood was doing a really good job of like, dropping clues and giving us breadcrumbs and teasing that through the story. So that part of the book was excellent. Like it was a little bit bonkers, but it was fun. It was my favorite part of the story. But Not in Love is not one that I would really recommend anybody start with. Like, I think to even like possibly enjoy some of the Ali Hazelwoodisms of this book, I think you have to like really have already experienced some of them. So I would still recommend people pick up literally anything else before this. And I was a little bit sad. Then I read Dark Corners by Megan Goldman. This is the second Rachel Kroll book, and I have very similar complaints to this as I do about the Jordan Manning book from earlier. It was nice being back here. I like Rachel Kroll as a character, just like I like Jordan Manning, but neither of these universes really feel super fleshed out. Dark Corners, I think I rated higher just because I liked the plotline of this one a little bit more. I liked seeing how she was going to solve this crime, was she able to do it, what was happening here. But I think that both the Jordan Manning books and the Rachel Kroll books, if they are going to continue and be these, more than just 3 books, or like a book every 5 years types of thing, that they would both do better by investing in some side characters. In the Rachel Kroll book, we do kind of get like this hint at a romance. And while Rachel Kroll says that she doesn't really, do continuing romances, it would be interesting to see if that is a character that could get pulled through the rest of the stories and utilized in a way, or if it's just going to go back to square one and we're just going to be seeing her in a new town doing some kind of investigating, talking about on her podcast. This is another book that I listened to on audio and I really enjoy. Then I listened to Henry, and I almost want to go back and give this book 5 stars. Almost do. In the same vein as A Little Life and Young Mungo, this is a story about childhood sexual abuse. This is like the 3rd or 4th time I've talked about that in this wrap up in the past 2 hours. I've almost been talking for 2 hours. Tell me to shut the fuck up. Anyway, Henry is a take, according to what I knew going in, was a take on the Henriade, but in a modern sort of a lens. And so this, like I said, that's what I knew. But what I'm going to tell you is this is a story about childhood sexual assault. Okay, there's really no getting around that. And if you do not want to read about a character who was abused as a child and that his abuse is continuing into the present of the book, do not read this book. Just don't do it. It's incestuous. It's abusive. It's not something I was mentally prepared for going in, and maybe that's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But like, of those books, of the Young Mungos, of the Little Lives that I've read, I think that Henry does it the best. It's more of an examination of our main Henry, his relationship with himself and his identity, and how his identity was shaped by his Uncle Richard, who he knew to be a queer man his entire life, and his father, Henry, who was a person who has been abusing him his whole life, and how those two men have shaped him and how he views himself because of those men, and what he thinks that means for himself if he is anything like his father, and like, why would you want to be with like that man? So it's, like I said, the best of the little queer books that center on abuse that I've read, but I don't know, much to think about on that one, but I do recommend it. Just do know that it's a lot heavier than I thought it was going to be. Women of Good Fortune by Sophie Wen. This is another book about women connecting in Shanghai. I think 2 of them used to work together, and now one of them has managed to get engaged to a wealthy man, and she doesn't really want to be engaged to this wealthy man, and so she comes up with this heist idea. Her friends come with this heist idea in order for her to be able to escape this engagement and live their life, but also for our other 2 characters to be able to live a life that they would want to live. One of the characters wants to get a divorce, and one of them wants to like freeze their eggs and start a family. And both of those are going to require money that they can get from this heist. So this was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was enjoyable enough. It was compelling enough. I didn't hate any of the characters, even though I do think that her friends were loathsome to read from at some points. But that was very clearly part of the arc of the story, because it gets addressed. So you're meant to like initially be on the side of the friends and be like, yes, you're being supportive, and then slowly kind of see like, are they being supportive? Are they really only out for themselves? And for all of that to come full circle. So Women of Good Fortune is not a new favorite by any means, but it was compelling enough for me, and I did wind up enjoying it. Then I listened to Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen, because this book, more than any other book on my Libro app, often takes the widget. Like, it's always displayed in the widget when I'm finished with a new Libro book, and it's like, here, you should listen to this. And so I was like, you know what, let me just listen to it. Julia Whalen, I've listened to her audiobooks a lot. I've never read anything she's written just because I think she only has one other book, and I think it is a novel, but it doesn't sound like anything I'd want to read. So this is the story of an audiobook narrator who is trying to take care of her grandmother, and in doing so falls in love. So at the beginning of the book, she is going on this trip to Vegas to go to a book convention where she meets a man at a bar, because that's what you do in Vegas, and they have this whirlwind night together, and then she goes back to California where she lives, and through a series of unfortunate events, she winds up narrating this author's audiobook. It's like her last book that she was able to write before she passed away, and in doing so, she comes in contact with another audiobook narrator, and they have this little romance. And I just think that Julia Whalen was too keenly aware of romance tropes and throwing them at the characters, and not really worried about writing an interesting story. Our main, like, the love interest of this book, like, the reader obviously knows that the person in Vegas and the person that's the audiobook narrator are the same person, but I feel like this person has like 3 different identities. You know, it's the person she meets at the bar, it's a person from the emails, and then it's the son of, or the grandson of what's her name, our main character's like closest author person. And so when she goes to give this award posthumously to this, you know, person's son, he shows up. Like, it's just too many things. And then on top of that, this man is not really present in the narrative until almost 2/3 of the way into the book. And so you have to speed run their meeting to their breakup in the same third act. It didn't work to me personally. And while I understand that it's all the same person, it just feels like a lot of whiplash for somebody else to process, like for an actual human being to process. The person I met in the bar, the person I've been emailing, and this person who was close with this author that I was close to, were all the same person. It's a little bit unserious. And so to me, it just took me out of it for a little bit. And while it is ridiculous and everyone around the character is able to appreciate the comedicness of, you know, an audiobook narrator who is currently narrating a romance is falling, having all these romantic things happen. I didn't find the humor in that. Like, I could just see it from a mile away. So I was like, it was too late for me to enjoy the humor. But also, so many other things in this character's life were at the forefront even before the romance. Her connection with her best friend A, her relationship with her grandmother who had dementia, a relationship she had with her father who was not really taking care of his mother who had dementia, relationship with our own character's mother, and her relationship with her disability because she was in an accident and lost her eye. Like, all of those things were taking place in precedent over the romance. And so while this was a romance book and Julia Whalen is marketing this as a romance, and there's a whole conversation in the book between general fiction and romance, to me, this was a general fiction book. And so I was never really able to escape the trappings of general fiction in order for me to love it like a romance. And so it kind of straddled that line, similar to a book we talked about earlier, hours ago at this point, which was it Ricki Wilde? It kind of straddled that same line like Ricki Wilde was straddling, and it just didn't work out to this book's benefit. Specifically when I'd already read some really bangers of a romance, like Forget Me Not, like How to End a Love Story. Even Funny Story, I think, is a little bit better. Or Colton Gentry, Forget Me Not, and How Not to Love. Like, come on, those 3 books are bangers. They're heavy hitters. And so when you're writing a romance and you got the heavy hitters, you're getting smacked away. Then I read Apostles of Mercy, which is the 3rd book in the Noema series by Lindsay Ellis. Listen, I'm a Noema girly. Okay, it's a book 3. I can't really talk too much about that one. Just know that in Axiom's End, you have aliens invade the Earth. Not invade the Earth, but we have the discovery of aliens in a Bush era America. Then in book 2, you have, okay, there are aliens. Are they people? Are they not people? What do they want? Like, what is happening? Why should we care they're aliens? And now in book 3, it's okay, you know they're aliens. You have some kind of reasoning of like why you should care they're aliens, but also they're not the only aliens. And so in the first 2 books, we kind of had an understanding that there were other aliens out there, both in our main character, Ampersand. He's kind of a side character, but he's important. Our alien character, Ampersand. And there's some other people, but Ampersand is the person I'm going to talk about. We understand that Ampersand is not the only alien in existence. He's not even the only alien on Earth. Like, we know of other aliens on Earth. And they're part of the plot in the first 2 books. And in book 3, we kind of get their sister species. And so now the world's a little bit opening up a little bit, and we are seeing the sister species and what that's going to mean for ampersand and what it means for Earth, because the sister species might be different and have different desires from Earth, from ampersand. And so the world is, a little bit bigger. This book does not end in a way that makes me think that this is going to be a trilogy. It ends in a way that makes me think we're going to get at least the 5 books that Lindsay talked about in the past, which I'm excited for because, like I said, I'm having a good time. I'm not into the monster fucking of it all. I don't really believe in. That's the other thing. Like, Axiom's End is also like there are aliens, and also what if an alien and a human were in love? So like there is a romantic relationship that is a through line through all of these with our alien characters, and they're not humanoid aliens, which does bother me more. If they were humanoid aliens, I could get on board. I could understand it, but I'm not into species girly. Okay, I'm not built that way. But that is also a through line that is always being played with. So the last book I need to talk about is Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. This is a story of Opal. And Opal is a raggedy person. And Opal wins the lottery. So she is able to escape the raggedy trappings of her life. And she decides she's going to buy this property that she sees on Facebook Marketplace. So on Facebook Marketplace, there's an advertisement for a large property with a little cabin on it for some $300,000. And Opal just won a $500,000 lottery. And so after taxes, she has about $390,000. And with her $390,000, she spends $300,000 of it on this little family farm that she then discovers is maybe not even legally hers, because that's where she meets Pepper. And Pepper is trying to maintain her grandmother's legacy and revitalize the farm, even though the farm has been in the black, not in the black, it's been in the red for like decades. But she's going to revitalize it. And so she doesn't know how, but she agrees. Initially, her and Pepper come to this agreement that, okay, well, Pepper will just rent the land back. Like, she will make payments back. How she's going to come up with this money, she couldn't tell you, but that's what's going to happen. This book just never worked for me, partially because this book is too long. Like, I say it's too long. By page 200, we were barely getting these people to meet each other, just because like the way the book was, the font size and the line spacing was so much. Like, it made the book longer than it really was, because it really needed to be. Of course, if they were going to format it the same, it needed to be closer to like 500 or 600 pages, so it could be a normal 200 pages, like a normal 300 page book. But it took so long for Pepper to even come up with the plan of how she was going to even try and get money, because it's not like she has any, in order to even kind of start on making these payments. But there was also this idea floating in the background that the person that Opal bought the farm from, Pepper's mother, didn't really have the right to sell the farm. Like, legally, it was okay because she was the next of kin and there was no will. But it was also like, if you're bringing up the fact that there's no will and the Pepper was looking for the will, eventually Pepper's going to find the will. And if she does find the will, what does that mean about your sale? Like, you're just out $300,000. And I feel like the entire relationship that Opal had to this lottery money just didn't make any sense, from the fact that she spent so much of it on this farm, was not really doing anything on the farm other than like, she was going to paint canvas shoes and like sell them on Etsy. And that was how she was going to like live, which is cute, but like, I don't think it's going to really be, utilities every month, property tax. What are we doing here? And then Pepper was just like, I'm going to run this farm, even though Pepper also had no money. And it was just a little bit silly. Eventually, around like 150 pages before the end of the book, they agree to join this little contest where they would potentially win, I think it's like $100,000. And that could be used as like a down payment on Pepper's payments back to Opal. I just didn't care about Pepper and Opal. There were some sex scenes in this that were interesting. There were some scenes about flowers that were kind of cute and kind of fun. Seeing them working on this floral arrangement was fun, even though we don't get to find out what it was until the end. And then we found out what it was. I was like, of course, I don't think that's going to win at all, but maybe it will. Maybe I'll be surprised because it's a book. But overall, like, it was better than the romance I read from them originally, which was their debut, A Brush with Love, where the anxiety weapon, that was just too much. And I felt it was also just giving a little bit pathetic, and I was not rooting for that couple to get together. Here, it's not that I didn't want Opal and Pepper to be together. I just was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I was really confused during the check-in process that I made for the patrons when I was reading this, just because it was so silly. Like I just wanted people to be serious, and it was a lot of people not being serious, and I I think I gave it 2 stars. So it was better, like I said, than the original romance that I read from them. And I would read from them again, but I think I would also give it some space and some distance. Like I won't read whatever is next. Opal has 2 sisters, and if we get the sisters books, I would not touch those. But whatever comes after those, maybe, just because I think that there is some improvement happening and I'm open to seeing more from them. I just don't care enough to like rush out and read backlist and make Maisie Eddings my whole personality. I really only grabbed this from the library because I keep seeing at the Books A Million, and every time I would see it, I would get like this urge to purchase it because I do like the cover. There's something about it. It was like pulling me in, and this idea of like, you know, a character winning the lottery, but maybe lottery romances are just not for me. Who knows? But I'm really happy that I did get it from the library and I did not buy it, because if I had bought this, I'd probably be more annoyed than because I got it for free. So because I got it for free, I can only hate it so much. And so those are the 36 books that I have read so far in the first 4 months of the year. I'll be back again, hopefully before, 4 months have passed by, to update you guys on whatever is happening next. But your best bet is probably to be over on the Patreon, where you can get in the moment updates about everything that I read at the time that I'm reading it. But for now, I'm going to go because I've been talking for an hour and 54 minutes. So I will see you guys again soon, or not so soon, in the next one. But until then, and until next time.